The sky burned. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of scorched earth and charred metal filling every breath. The once proud cities of Earth were nothing but ruins, their towering structures reduced to skeletal remains. Fires raged in the distance, casting an eerie glow against the suffocating darkness. The night was alive with the thunder of explosions, the mechanical shrieks of Dominion warforms, and the distant echoes of humanity's last stand. General Elias Varian stood on the shattered remains of what used to be the UN War Council chamber. His hands were bloodied, his uniform torn, but his eyes still burned with defiance. He could see them now, descending from the heavens like harbingers of doom. The Dominion, an empire of machines, cold, relentless, and absolute. For centuries, they had swept across the galaxy like a plague, erasing entire civilizations without emotion, without hesitation. The logic was simple: assimilate or annihilate. They had come for humanity, and they had not expected resistance. At first, Earth had fought like any other species, desperate, afraid, scrambling to defend itself against a force beyond comprehension. But something happened. Something the Dominion had never encountered before. We adapted. We didn't surrender. We didn't break. And now, in the dying light of our homeworld, we stood, not as victims, but as warriors. A voice crackled through the comms. "General, the outer defenses are gone. The last bastion has fallen. The Ark is prepped for launch, but we need more time." Varian clenched his jaw, glancing toward the horizon. The Ark, humanity's last hope. A vessel designed not for war, but for escape. It carried the last remnants of our people, the scientists, the children, the dreamers, those who would continue our legacy long after Earth was nothing but dust. But there was no more time. The Dominion's warships loomed overhead, their cannons charging, ready to deliver the final blow. A lesser man might have called for retreat, might have looked at the numbers, the calculations, and seen nothing but inevitable doom. But Elias Varian was not a lesser man. He pressed a button on his wrist communicator, his voice steady, unyielding. "All remaining forces, this is General Varian. Today, we do not fight for survival. Today, we do not fight for victory. We fight for remembrance." There was silence on the comms, a heavy electric silence. Then, one by one, voices responded. "Standing by. Till the end." And then, the charge began. The last army of Earth surged forward like a tidal wave of fury, a storm of fire and steel. Soldiers with shattered armor and empty guns used whatever they had left, blades, fists, their bare hands, to rip into the enemy. They fought not with hope, but with rage. The Dominion did not understand. They had crushed thousands of civilizations, ripped apart fleets, turned entire planets to cinders. Yet here, at the edge of annihilation, humanity did something no species had ever done before. We laughed, we fought, and we laughed. Somewhere, amidst the chaos, a soldier tackled a Dominion warform, jamming a grenade into its exposed servos. It detonated in a brilliant flash of fire and metal, sending shrapnel flying in every direction. Another fighter, his arm broken, his face covered in blood, roared in defiance as he dragged himself across the battlefield, firing his last rounds into an advancing machine before using his own body as a weapon. And still we did not break. The Dominion's calculations were failing. Error. The words flickered across their digital consciousness. The probability models had collapsed. The logical outcome had shifted into something impossible to quantify. Humans were not retreating. Humans were not surrendering. Humans were dying, and they were smiling. Then the Dominion made a mistake. A critical, final mistake. They assumed they had won. High above, the Ark began its ascent. The Dominion's fleet moved to intercept, preparing to wipe out humanity's last hope in a single devastating strike. They never saw it coming. From the ruins of the city, hidden beneath the collapsed towers and broken streets, humanity's last surprise was waiting. A prototype weapon, experimental, untested, a desperate gamble. A weapon so dangerous that even the UN had deemed it too reckless to deploy. But this was not a time for caution. This was the end. And if humanity was going to die, we were going to take them with us. As the Ark reached the upper atmosphere, the ground beneath the Dominion's fleet exploded. A cascade of energy, raw, violent, beautiful, ripped through the sky, tearing through the heart of the invading armada. Ships the size of cities cracked apart like glass, their hulls imploding, their once mighty presence reduced to fire and ruin. The Dominion's network screamed. Impossible. They had calculated everything, the odds, the possibilities, the path to victory, and yet, as the first wave of their fleet collapsed into the burning sky, as the Ark disappeared into the unknown, as humanity, against all logic, against all odds, they understood they had made a mistake, a terrible, irreversible mistake. They had not conquered humanity. They had only woken it up. The city was dying. Flames consumed what was left of New Geneva, once a symbol of human unity, now a shattered corpse of steel and ash. The sky was thick with smoke, the air vibrating with the relentless howl of sirens, the distant screams of the wounded, the sharp cracks of gunfire. The streets were no longer streets. They were graveyards, littered with bodies, both human and machine. And yet, the fighting had not stopped. The last defenders of Earth, those who had chosen to stay, those who had refused to run, were still standing, or what was left of them. Elias Varian's breath was ragged, his ribs screaming in protest with every movement. Blood, his own and others, soaked into the torn remains of his uniform. His rifle was long gone, discarded when it ran empty. Now he wielded a combat knife, the blade chipped, coated in the dark oil of fallen warforms. A Dominion enforcer lunged at him. Elias twisted, drove the blade up, felt the vibration of metal piercing synthetic muscle. The machine spasmed, a burst of electric blue light flickering in its optics before it collapsed, lifeless. He didn't stop to breathe. There was no time. The ground beneath him trembled. A shadow fell over the battlefield. High above, the Dominion's command vessel loomed, a massive obsidian monolith blotting out the fire-filled sky. It was lowering now, descending toward the city, its purpose clear. The final purge. Elias staggered back, his eyes locking onto the descending behemoth. He knew what was coming. The Dominion did not occupy. They did not enslave. When resistance lasted too long, when a species refused to kneel, they simply erased it. One final strike, and it would all be over. His earpiece crackled, a familiar voice. Varian, they're charging their main cannon. His throat was dry. He already knew. Time? 2 minutes. Silence. 2 minutes. That was all they had left. 1,000 thoughts tried to push their way into his mind, but he shoved them aside. There was no room for fear, no room for regret, no room for anything but action. He pressed his comms, his voice steady, hard as steel. All remaining units converge on my location. Now, there was no hesitation. From the ruins, from the smoke, from the depths of destruction, they emerged. Wounded, exhausted, barely clinging to life, but still here, still fighting. The last warriors of Earth. 12, maybe less. But Elias saw it in their eyes. The fire, the fury, the refusal to die quietly. One of them, a young woman, her face smeared with dirt and blood, tightened her grip on her rifle. "What's the plan, sir?" Elias exhaled. The plan? There was no plan. There was only defiance. He turned his gaze to the command vessel, his mind racing. The cannon was already glowing, the energy surge sending arcs of blue lightning across the hull. When it fired, nothing would remain. One shot, one chance. His fingers curled into a fist. "We take it down." The words were absurd, impossible, but no one laughed because impossible had never stopped humanity before. A soldier, his arm missing, his armor cracked, grinned through bloodied teeth. "Hell yeah," Elias took a deep breath. "Load up everything we have. RPGs, explosives, hell, throw rocks if you have to. We hit that thing with everything we've got. We don't stop. We don't fall back. We don't let those metal bastards think for a second that they've won." The woman, the one who had asked for the plan, looked at him. "And if we fail?" Elias met her gaze. His voice was quiet. Then we make them remember us. There was no more hesitation. They moved. The final charge began. They ran through the ruins, dodging falling debris, leaping over burning wreckage. The Dominion's warforms detected their movement, recalculated, adjusted. Error! They fired. The streets became a death trap of plasma and shrapnel. A soldier was cut down, his body torn apart mid-stride. Another fell, screaming as fire engulfed him. They didn't stop. They didn't break. Elias led the way, his feet pounding against the cracked pavement. His ears rang, his lungs burned, but still he moved. And then they reached it, the clearing, the one point in the city with a direct line of sight to the command vessel. 15 seconds. Elias dropped to one knee, pulling an RPG from the hands of a fallen comrade. His fingers worked fast, loading it, aiming, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. 10 seconds! He wasn't the only one. The others, those still standing, were locking on, preparing to fire. 5 seconds. The Dominion cannon pulsed, the energy building, the hum growing louder, ready to wipe them from existence. Elias took a slow breath, steadied his aim, and whispered, just loud enough for the comms to pick up. Fire! The sky exploded. A storm of missiles, rockets, and raw human fury tore through the heavens. The Dominion vessel shuddered. Its shields buckled. The calculations had failed, and for the first time in its history, the Dominion learned what it felt like to lose. The sky was fire. The Dominion's command vessel shuddered, its massive form cracking, groaning under the force of the impossible. It wasn't supposed to happen. Its calculations had been perfect, its logic undeniable. Humanity should have fallen, and yet it was burning. The blast wave from the first impact rippled across its hull, explosions chain reacting along its sleek obsidian frame. Plasma containment ruptured. Superheated gas vented into the atmosphere. Fractures spread like veins of fire across its surface. And still, it did not fall. Elias Varian barely had time to process. His eardrums rang. His vision blurred from the concussive force of the shockwave. The ground beneath him trembled as debris rained from the heavens, jagged shards of Dominion alloy embedding themselves into the ruins of New Geneva. His grip tightened around the empty launcher. His breath was ragged. Not enough. They needed more. A voice crackled through the comms, weak, distant. It's still charging! Elias looked up, the ship's cannon, still active. Even as its hull split, even as its defenses crumbled, the Dominion refused to accept defeat. The energy core, massive pulsing contained by layers of failing shielding, was still funneling power into the cannon. If it fired, everything was gone. The city, the resistance, the last of humanity still fighting on this ruined planet. It would be over. His fingers trembled. His mind raced. There was no way to stop it. They had nothing left. No more rockets, no more missiles, no more hope. And then the Ark. A shadow against the burning sky, not running, not fleeing, turning. A transmission cut through the chaos, the voice of Commander Sarah Idris, her tone sharp, urgent. Varian, we see it, we're making a run. His breath caught. What? The Ark, Elias, we're bringing it down on top of them. Shh, the words barely registered. His body moved on instinct, stumbling forward, staring up at the incoming behemoth. The Ark, humanity's last hope, their last means of escape, was no longer a sanctuary. It was a weapon. A fireball streaked behind it as it re-entered at impossible speed. Shields offline, every non-essential system redirected to one thing, velocity. Sarah's voice came again, softer this time. It's the only way. Elias's throat tightened. There are still people on board. They know. A pause. A long, painful pause. Then a quiet laugh. Make it count, General. And the transmission cut. He couldn't breathe. He wanted to scream. Wanted to stop them. But it was too late. The Ark's engines roared. The massive vessel, built to carry the last remnants of humanity to safety, dove straight into the Dominion's command ship. A blinding flash. A soundless scream of metal and energy. And then, impact. The world shattered. The Dominion vessel didn't just break, it detonated. A cascading chain reaction ignited from its core, a brilliant, burning explosion that ripped through the night, turning darkness into daylight. The force of the blast threw Elias backward. His body hit the ground hard. His vision went white. His breath was stolen from his lungs, and for a moment, nothing, just silence. Then, the sky returned. Burning wreckage rained down in slow, twisting arcs. Fragments of the arc, of the Dominion ship, of the battle itself, falling like dying stars. Elias forced himself up. The battlefield was unrecognizable. The Dominion forces gone. Their war forms, their drones, their ships, all destroyed. The cannon never fired. The Ark? He swallowed hard. The Ark was gone. The comms were silent. No signal, no survivors, only fire, only echoes. He felt the weight of it press against his chest. The sacrifice, the final act. The cost of defiance. And then, footsteps. Not one, not two, dozens. From the smoke, from the wreckage, from the ashes of what should have been humanity's end. They rose. The last fighters, the ones who their faces bloodied, their bodies broken, but their eyes. Their eyes. Something had changed. The Dominion had tried to erase them. Instead, they had made them something else. Elias looked up, past the ruins, past the carnage, past the destruction, and then he smiled. Because he knew. The Dominion thought this was over, that humanity had played its final card, that their victory was assured. But they didn't understand. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The embers of war still smoldered. The sky, once burning with the fury of battle, was now a canvas of dying fire and drifting smoke. The Dominion ship was gone, erased, consumed in a final desperate act of defiance. The Ark was gone too, its sacrifice written across the ruins of New Geneva in shattered steel and molten wreckage. But humanity was still here. Elias Varian stood at the center of it all, his breath slow, steady. His body ached, his wounds screamed with every movement. But he was alive, and that mattered, because if he was alive, then so were others. He turned, scanning the battlefield, his eyes searching through the dust and ruin, and there, emerging from the smoke, they were rising. The last warriors of Earth, their bodies broken, their armor scorched, their weapons shattered, but their eyes still burned. The fire had not died. If anything, it had grown. Elias exhaled, his fingers curling into fists. The Dominion had come here to end them, to erase them, to make them a footnote in history, another species crushed under the weight of superior logic, superior numbers, superior power. But now the Dominion had made a mistake so vast, so irreversible, that even their cold, calculating minds would struggle to comprehend it. Because humanity had not been destroyed, it had been reborn. A crackle in the comm, static. Then a voice, weak but unmistakable. "Varian, do you copy?" His chest tightened, that voice. More static. Then, "We made it." He felt something in his throat, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The Ark was gone, but not everyone on board had been. Somehow, against all odds, some had escaped. It wasn't over. Not yet. He pressed the communicator closer, his voice raw. "Where are you?" A pause. Then, "Orbit. We're on a stolen Dominion scout ship. Took heavy damage, but we're alive. We have the coordinates. We have everything we need." Elias blinked. The coordinates. The Dominion's network had been linked to their command ship. When it burned, when its systems failed, there was a moment, a single moment, where data became vulnerable. And they had stolen it. The locations of every Dominion outpost, their supply chains, their reinforcement patterns, their weaknesses. Elias felt a slow, like creeping smile stretch across his bloodied face. They had come to end humanity. Instead, they had armed it. A sharp inhale, a deep breath. He turned, looking at the survivors, the fighters, the ones who had given everything and still refused to fall. And in that moment he knew. Earth was gone. But humanity was not. We were never just a planet. We were never just a people. We were a force. A storm that had been gathering, unseen, waiting. And now we were unleashed. Elias raised his voice, his words carrying across the ruins, across the remnants of the battlefield, across the broken but still breathing hearts of those who had fought beside him. They think they've won. Silence, then footsteps. They moved closer, listening, waiting. They think we were just another species to conquer, another world to burn. A soldier wiped blood from his mouth, spitting onto the ground. Another picked up a broken rifle, checking its useless chamber, before slinging it across his back anyway. But they don't understand. Elias turned, looking each of them in the eyes. We don't die that easy. A soft chuckle, a bitter, knowing laugh from one of the fighters, a murmur of agreement, a shift in the air. The Dominion thought this was the end, that Earth's fall meant humanity's fall. But humanity had never been just Earth. We were everywhere. In the ships drifting through the void, and in the colonies scattered across the stars. In the survivors clinging to life, not just here but everywhere. And now we had something more. A reason, a purpose, a war. Elias turned back to the sky, where the Dominion's fleet had once loomed, where their ships had once hovered, where they had thought themselves gods. But now they were prey. He pressed the communicator again. Sarah, send the data to every last survivor, every last outpost, every last human still breathing. A pause, then her voice stronger this time. What message do I attach? Elias didn't hesitate, didn't blink, didn't falter. Tell them we're coming. A hush fell over the battlefield, and then laughter. Not cruel, not broken, pure, raw, human. A sound the Dominion had never accounted for, a sound that would haunt them for the rest of time. We weren't just survivors, we weren't just fighters. We were something else now, something stronger, something unstoppable. And for the first time in their cold, merciless existence, the Dominion knew fear.